The chapter opens by showing off the wailing dragon demon in the most disgusting way possible. It eats human heads, steals their memories and voices, and even uses a child's voice to bait its victims, so right away you know this is not a normal monster hunt. Unknown says, uses the voice of a child to lure its prey. The demon does not just chase people down, it hunts the ones already drowning in despair, because that makes them easier to break. That idea hits even harder when Yise shows up in the middle of the chaos, bruised and shaken, proving he is already standing way too close to this nightmare for comfort. Unknown says, those consumed by despair. Then the chapter slams into full-on combat, and the first thing everybody is fighting over is blame. Brother Woljang gets dragged into the argument, and when the blue-haired fighter calls Yise a good kid, it makes the whole thing feel less like a brawl and more like a disaster nobody can emotionally handle. Ilshui says, I thought you were a good kid. In the middle of that mess, a giant beast barrels through the forest with somebody riding along in the chaos, and the adults are still trying to keep the demon hunt alive. Guichin gets asked if he is alright, but the answer is basically no one can afford to quit now, not with everything already this far gone. Guichin says, this demon hunt will fail without you. For a second, hope creeps back in, because the adults start wondering if the kids are really still alive. Then the demon ruins everything by speaking through their stolen faces and voices, and Yise learns the terrifying truth, this thing is not saving anyone, it is wearing the dead like bait. Unknown says, go up. Gojiel and Woljang are already dead. The demon keeps gaslighting everybody by using the missing kids' voices against them, and now Yise is being framed like he is the attacker. That lie buys the monster just enough confusion to keep the fight ugly, until the blade comes down and blood hits the frame. Unknown says, Yise is trying to kill us. The fighters stop wasting breath and start thinking like hunters again. Guichin wants the demon dead, the dagger gets treated like a serious treasure, and in the middle of all that, somebody finally admits Yise's judgment may be right even if the kid himself feels a little broken inside. Guichin says, focus only on killing the demon. Nobody gets the luxury of stopping, so the group keeps pushing forward, even with blood in the mix and a child being pulled into the danger zone. Then the emotional pressure spikes again when the blue-haired horned fighter asks if someone even has a heart, because at this point the rescue is starting to feel like a test of whether anyone can still be human. Woljang says, do you not have a heart? After all that chaos, one injured body is left dragging through the forest while the others argue over who abandoned Gojiel and let things get this bad. That guilt spirals into pure despair, and before anyone can breathe, the pain gets shoved into another ugly collision that leaves everyone rattled. Villager Elder says, he ended up like that because we abandoned him. Then Ilchui gets hit with the kind of grief nobody walks off clean. The chapter spells it out, losing family never leaves you, and surviving can make you want to disappear too, but Yise pushes back and forces the question of what giving up would actually solve. Unknown says, watching your family die is something you'll never forget. Instead of backing down, the fighters double down. One of them flat out says they would make the same choice again, and another swears they will survive to the very end, which is basically the chapter telling you that these people are not done fighting yet. Unknown says, I will survive to the very end. Once that survival vow lands, the chapter snaps right into revenge mode. The promise is simple, if they make it out of this mess, they are hunting every last demon, and the action keeps chewing through whatever monster gets in their way next. Yise says, I will hunt every last demon. For one wild second, the demon slips, and the fighters know they have to blast through that opening right now. The chapter also drops the big weapon lore here, the meridian-cutting blade can cut off demonic energy, which means they finally have something that can actually hurt this thing the right way. Unknown says, we have to take it down now. Then the orange-haired fighter goes in with the green-handled blade, and that swing finally rips the lie apart. The kids were never the target on that panel anyway, this was a demon wearing their panic as a disguise, and now everybody knows it. Unknown says, it's not the children. It's a demon. The second the disguise breaks, the anger comes out loud and ugly, those were not the children, and nobody is pretending otherwise anymore. But the fight still bites back, and the last thing hanging over the scene is that awful cry for an uncle, which makes the whole mess feel way more personal than a normal monster fight. Unknown says, "They are not the children." The aftermath is a mess of blood, gasping, and half-crushed monster parts, and the chapter is not shy about telling you that this round was dangerous. They survive it, but only because the fighters keep pushing through pain while the demon gets slammed hard enough to force a real opening. Unknown says, "That was dangerous." That last clash finally does what almost nothing else could do, it scares the wailing dragon demon. For the first time in all its hunts, it feels its own life on the line, and you can tell the monster is furious about it. That fight did real damage, because the chapter straight up says this hunt was supposed to go smoothly, but instead the demon ended up with a mortal wound. When the monster's true body finally gets shown, with all those heads and red eyes, it becomes clear why nobody can afford to let it recover. Unknown says, had instead left it with a mortal wound. Even wounded, the demon is still thinking like a predator, and now it wants to wipe out the one anomaly it cannot stand. The forest turns into another bloody scramble, with Yise and the others getting shoved into a fight that is still very much alive. Unknown says, it had to eliminate the anomaly among its prey. The demon comes back biting, and the fighters answer by calling it cornered instead of scared, which is exactly the kind of trash talk you say when you are one bad move away from dying. Then Yise gets dragged into the recognition mess again, because this fight keeps asking the same ugly question, who is real, and who is the lie? Unknown says, "Why don't you recognize me?" By now the fight is pure survival, and the characters are starting to shout identity like it is armor. One man even cries that he has a wife and children while another begs for his father, but the demon does not slow down for any of it. Gojiel says, "I'm the real Gojiel." At this point, nobody is pretending this is a clean battle anymore. One side is screaming that a demon does not get to live, the other side is getting slammed with murder accusations, and the whole thing feels like it is burning down to one simple rule: finish the monster first. Unknown says, "There's no way I'd let a demon live." After all that noise, the forest gets weirdly quiet, and the only thing left is the ugly sound of something being crushed. Everyone seems frozen on the same thought: how did it get this far, and who is supposed to clean up the mess now? Unknown says, "How can he do something like that?" The chapter ends on a nasty little contrast. The monster is whimpering, but Yise is still standing in a blood-soaked field full of corpses and monster bodies. And when he answers with that cold little line at the end, it feels like the moment a scared kid starts becoming a real demon hunter. Yise says, "Good to know." So yeah, this chapter is basically the moment Yise stops just being the kid who survived a tragedy and starts acting like someone who can actually stare a demon down. The wailing dragon demon gets wounded, the forest turns into a bloodbath, and by the end, Yise's attitude is way colder than it was at the start. If you want, I can also turn the next chapter into the same kind of recap.